show up okay on the
Yep, I can see it.
perfect. All right. So first off, I just wanted to take a moment to just say thank you to everybody being online. It's really important these days. One of the participants, Lynn and I, were chatting beforehand and really talking about how important it is for all of us as members of the community to share best practices, tactics, insights, because it truly takes a tribe to be able to help entrepreneurs and small business owners. All of you as business owners, you're truly the lifeblood of the economy. And so it takes all of us to come together to make sure we can share best practices and information. And that's really why we are here today. Um, we were getting asked from the Minnesota Chamber, from Entrepreneurs Organization, and from some others about putting together some content and sharing insights on tactics small business owners can utilize during this challenging time. And so we were in a lucky position because we were already putting together seminars for business owners around emotion and money. And of course, this is a very emotional time with money. So we've taken that content and we've updated it to be very specific on tactics that entrepreneurs can utilize during this recession. With that, wanted to share why we are here. Again, we are founded on the principles of community. We put in the slide our core values on the right. If you read through those, everything that we're doing in this webinar is aligned with our values. We want to be collaborative and transparent, and we want to help people really think through not only surviving this recession, but thriving and really encouraging that growth mindset through all of this. And at the end of the day, we're all about responsibility to our stakeholders in our communities. So this is really aligned with who we are and why we're doing this today. The goal today is to provide some insights, and hopefully you have a couple of nuggets to take away for your own purposes or things that you can share. We are very big into mental models, really helping people understand tactics to evaluate options and to make decisions efficiently. And so we're going to share a mental model today that we have developed over the last several months. And the biggest piece to this is also talking about capital. There's a lot of questions coming out around money that is available, so the time and the cost and how to get that capital. We are not experts on some of the things that are coming out from the SBA and the CARE Act that came through Congress the other day. We do have resources on that, but again, I'd point back to the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Those are terrific resources to get insights directly from the SBA and the others. So we're going to take a more holistic approach to how people can identify capital. So at the end of the day, we're here to help. That's what this is all about, is a community. Feel free to ask us questions or follow up afterwards. Anything we can do to be helpful, that's what we're here for. Anything else, Nick?
I think the biggest thing is just at the end, as we go through this, taking notes and being able to experience share at the end of how is everybody dealing with this. Are there things that are working for you? Are there things that aren't? What suggestions do you have? I think that can be really valuable as we go through the presentation and what we get out of it at the end.
Terrific. And we're going to start with our mental model to share some insights with you on how to utilize efficient decision making. Prior to academia, hundreds of years ago, as human beings, all we had were our instincts. And we had to utilize instincts as human beings to make decisions. And then with academia, there became a really big drive to have data and to really utilize data to make decisions. And that always bothered me a bit when I was in college, because the idea that you only use data does not really correlate well with the real world. And as entrepreneurs, we know that utilizing data can lead to paralysis. And so over the last 10 to 20 years, there's been a whole new field emerging around behavioral economics. And it's been fabulous because it finally ties the real world that we're seeing as entrepreneurs with how we can go and execute. And so I wanted to share with you today that not only can you use data, but now the research is suggesting that intuition is very valid. The idea of a fast and frugal decision tree. So utilize the data that you have at hand, and at the end of the day, utilize your intuition to make those final decisions. Time is of the essence in a recession. It is super important that you are efficient in your decision making. So have some confidence to lean on the experiences that you do have, get the data that you have available, and we're going to talk about how to expedite some of that data collection to be able to make decisions quickly so you can systematically reduce complexity in your decision making to survive, critically important going into this recession, and to ultimately survive. The mental model that we would like to introduce to you today is the concept of Go West. WEST is an acronym that we developed for Watch, Execute, Survive, and Thrive. And this mental model is really a framework to allow you to make superior money decisions. So let's dive in. First, W is watch. This is a core concept around the practice of observation, and especially observation without judgment. It's the idea that you can start to take a look at financial accounts and to see and understand what is going on, and to do so in a way that is without judgment. And the reason why that nuanced point is important is because a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners didn't jump into business because they were enamored with money and in bookkeeping, right? They did it because they love the product and the service. They like the hunt and the game. And for a lot of business owners, finance and accounting is daunting and it's not fun. So this framework, West, can help those business owners get more comfortable with their numbers because, again, going into this recession, it's going to be as important as ever. So utilize small habits to increase the awareness of money. Now is an important time to print off your bank statements or any accounts like PayPal and Shopify that you utilize for accepting payments and paying people. Look at those and try to stay calm. Don't panic too much. Look through them, analyze it, journal your findings, and start to understand where money is going in and out of your business. But start small because it can be very powerful as we lead into the next piece to going west, and that is the E of execute. My life changed a number of years ago when we started having kids, and I wasn't able to get workouts in like I used to. And I was becoming familiar with BJ Fogg's work. So if you're online and you can see the slide here on Tiny Habits, this was a profound impact on my life. It sounds extremely simple, and it is, but it's the idea that you do little things and start small and build upon them, the tiny habits. So in my case, it was putting shoes next to my bed at night. So when I woke up, I said, yes, I have to go for a jog. And I'd go for a jog around the block. And then I would stop. And then I'd run a little more the next day. But the idea is to start small and to build repeatable processes so it becomes a part of your routine. When you start observing, then you can move into execution phase. When you have these tiny habits of looking at financial accounts and getting comfortable with them, that can help you become better with money decisions in your business. And one of the things that you need to execute upon, if you don't already have it, is a financial forecast. Today, it's important to have a rolling 13-week cash forecast to understand cash in and out of the business, and to have a forecast that's monthly for 24 months. We have a template of this that we're working to finalize. So if anybody wants that, please let us know. Email us after this, and we'll get that to you. But it is really important to think about cash in and out of that business on a weekly basis, because cash is very, very important into this recession. And to wrap up this slide, I'm going to talk about this a little more here in the coming slides, but Now's the time to execute upon expanding your network, to cultivate and to build relationships with capital providers, and to build trust. So if you're members of a roundtable group or if you are a member of the chamber, now's the time to be active and to lean into those peer relationships, because they can be and will be extremely valuable in the weeks and the months to come.
And I think the one thing I just emphasize is it doesn't need to be complicated. The watch, being able just to print your bank statement and identify the ins and outs of cash, and then use that to build your financial forecast. That's all the financial forecast is really doing, is understanding what's the cash in, cash out, and then applying some assumptions to it. It's like, what if I have a 50% reduction in revenue? That could be that's how you can start to forecast what's out there. And that can help you identify, also doing a zero-based budgeting approach of what are all those expenses that I identified, and what are the key expenses that I need to be able to keep operating versus things that are nice to have or that are something that might be painful to cut, but that I could cut. So I think that's a big piece of this, is it doesn't need to be complicated. It can be a simple approach to start to feel a lot more comfortable with the financial aspect of your business, which is critically important right now.
Yes, thank you, Nick. Yeah, it is super important to be calm and to do the simple things today that can help compound long-term results. Moving on to the S in West is survive. We talk about 3 C's for survival, and that is capital, community, and cash management. Capital we're going to expand upon in a couple more slides, so I'll leave that be for now. Community, it's really important. Like Linda's on the phone today. She operates or she's on the webinar. She has a number of roundtables. That is extremely valuable. When you work with people like Linda and have roundtables of people that you know and trust, that's super important. So look to people like Linda. If you have, if you're in Rotary or chambers, the SBA has a number of programs like with SCORE. Utilize those to tap into those networks and to understand from peers what they're doing for surviving and thriving in their business during these uncertain times. And then the big piece today that we want to spend some time on is cash management. It's very important to accelerate the crisis. If you know that things are going to be extremely challenging, now is the time to act. It's important to start looking at what are critical costs, what can you cut, and to start making those cuts sooner rather than later. It's important to communicate with stakeholders. And I will share over my couple decades of being in and around finance and investments, where I have seen entrepreneurs and business owners do really well, even when they're in really bad situations, is when they over communicate with their stakeholders. Everybody, suppliers, vendors, especially with bankers, shareholders. When people can be transparent and forthright about the situation that they're in, that's where I've seen the most business owners get support in helping them through those tough times. So now is the time to plan and communicate with those stakeholders across the board. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
One thing I'd emphasize too is that I think some businesses, and obviously in hospitality and restaurants, are experiencing this right away. Their revenue went from 100% to 0% very quickly. And they're obviously scrambling to be able to make these decisions. But there's also businesses like B2B businesses that maybe you aren't seeing the impact as much right now, and there's a longer sales cycle associated with it. But 3 months from now, you might really start to see the impact of everything that's happening. So even if you think you're in a really good spot compared to a lot of other businesses, which you probably are, you really need to start thinking about doing and executing on some of these strategies and calling your suppliers right now, so that you're prepared for that eventual downturn in revenue. And worst case, it doesn't or best case, it doesn't happen, and then you're still in a very strong cash position and can get through all of this. But I would definitely emphasize to start doing that now, no matter what type of business you're in.
Yeah, and if you're not comfortable having these conversations, talk to business advisors like, again, Linda, and I know Brad Connor's on the phone. People have worked with business owners for the bulk of their careers. Figure out how to have those conversations and start working with vendors and suppliers. We're hearing a number of stories. I'll share one of them right now. There's a business that has been calling all their utility providers and asking for deferral of payments and terms on their utilities going forward, and they're having good success with that. Now's the time to start having those conversations, to get concessions wherever you can to see yourself through these issues. And then moving on to, if you do need to tap into additional money to be brought into your business through your bank or through investors like us, now's the time to be having those conversations, even if it's individual investors, but to go out there and start collecting indications of interest, have those conversations, build your list, understand who could make an investment or provide a loan, and jot down what that looks like and to build that list. The last couple pieces on cash management, we're not going to touch upon today. We'd save that for more of a workshop seminar, but we have views and insights on how people should think about their profitability to be able to survive. On Thrive, this is the last piece to go west. The T is Thrive. We added a line in our slide here on the very first one, and it says invert any problems. And the reason why we put that in here is because this recession and the challenges that we're facing can be an opportunity for business owners. To share a couple of insights, we're familiar with pharmacies that are now expediting their business plan around curbside delivery. We're familiar, of course, with restaurants that are doing the same. Now is the time to think about, instead of bemoaning the issues at hand, to maybe think about where are there opportunities in the business model to do the things that you've wanted to do. Maybe it's going digital, whatever the case may be. But think about this time not only to survive, but also how you can thrive through this moment and come through this stronger. So invert the problem. To be able to thrive, one needs a forecast and not a budget. And we're working on a blog post on this because people have a question what this means. A lot of people use forecast and budget to mean the same thing, but a forecast is truly a roadmap to building capital and enterprise value. A budget is really a license to spend. It's too high level for what one needs going into a recession, especially. A forecast is going to have the ability to be dynamic and to really update with various scenarios on what one needs to be prepared with, no matter what happens here in the coming months. To just wrap up a couple points on this slide quickly, again, utilize community to not only help get through this, but to think about new aspects to your business model. Think about how you can increase the cash conversion to your underlying economic model. That's one of the best ways to develop better sources of cash. And then an idea that is really that works really well for a lot of business owners is the idea of building an acquisition list. Is to really utilize this to think about opportunities to grow, gather market intelligence, and then that list can be your ultimate exit strategy someday. It might be a bit much if you haven't started this already, with the recession on hand, but think about how you can utilize insights on other players in your market to be able to maybe make acquisitions or to be able to move into new markets or new products when others are faltering. So we'll leave Thrive at that and move into capital. So going west, the key to all of this is a framework on how to think about money in your business. But one of the key aspects to a healthy business is to have good sources of capital. And so we've been asked a lot about the sources of money and the timing involved. First, and the most immediate available source of capital is what you have with your business today. And it's managing the cash and to make sure there's no unnecessary expenses. We've talked about talking with suppliers and vendors. Any of the accounts payable, making sure that you've got the best terms or see what they're flexible on. These are all things you can do now. Talk with any accounts receivable. Try to get paid as quickly as possible. Now is not the time to let accounts receivable sit out there and linger. Get on the horn, send out invoices, and if you need to, cut them a discount, but get that cash in the door as soon as you can, because that cash is super important today. And then finally, if you have products or services where you can get prepaid, now's the time to do it. You may want to think about your pricing model and to do things that you can to get paid on your products and services today. Again, those are all things you can do now. Things that are going to take a little more time. The next closest is going to be your current banking relationships or any economic development relationships that you have. Work with your bank, understand what they can do. There's a lot of moving parts, of course, with the new legislation and with the SBA, but now is the time to be having those conversations because they're already familiar and they have a trust factor with you, and that's super important. If you don't have any relationships with community developers, whether it's from your utilities or your local municipalities or even in the state or regionally, let us know. We don't know all of them, but we can definitely start pointing you in the right direction. They know where the pockets of money are that can be quicker to tap into because the community wants to make sure that the businesses aren't quicker. The next available source of capital is going to be pre-existing relationships. Again, there's two things that move money in this world: trust and emotion. And so that trust factor is really important because existing relationships already know who you are. And so they can act quicker. They could be able to provide a loan or to buy stock or whatever it looks like sooner than anybody else can. So think about any pre-existing relationships that you have, because that's going to be what you can tap into in the next few weeks. Any new relationships is going to take time, probably at least 2 months. And I've seen a lot of times where it can take upwards of 24 months to get capital from new investor relationships. And of course, this is going to be more challenging in the time of recession because these sources of capital are going to be overwhelmed with requests. The most available is going to be individuals. So angel investors or people who are making investments. It may even be people that are in and around your industry that understand it. That would be helpful. So those business owners, they might be able to provide capital and to do that. And then institutional capital. So professional funds, people like Nick and I and Hill Capital, you know, our entire days are filled with thinking about how to deploy capital and support businesses. So any of the institutions are the firms that are doing this for a living, like private equity and venture capital. Again, any of those relationships, that's going to take some time to get in front of them, and it's going to take time to go through an underwriting process for them to actually write a check. So the reason why we're sharing this is because one has to be very realistic today about what the sources of capital are and the timing that's going to be involved. Because for some businesses, they may not have the luxury of waiting 3 to 4 months to be able to tap into a new investor relationship.
Yeah, so my big takeaway from this slide is really like, what can I do now as a business owner to try to increase my cash balance? And number one is the working capital, calling suppliers, a lot of suppliers and a lot of, for different businesses, just giving them a call. All of a sudden your terms go from 60 to 90 days. And that can be really, really helpful because we don't know how long this thing's going to last, but any additional time that you can get, the better likelihood that you can make your way through it. And just doing those simple phone calls and talking to people, that's the one thing that you can definitely do today. And then a lot of people are thinking about what the government assistance and the stimulus packages, but those are going to take time. I mean, the government's going to now have to execute a $2 trillion package. That does not happen overnight. That does not happen in a month. It probably happens at, the quickest it could possibly happen is when you start receiving funds in 2 months. And so don't sit on and wait for those types of packages. You have to be stepping back and thinking about being patient with those, but the things that you can execute today, and then start thinking more long-term, because maybe you can do some things today that help with your cash balance. Start working through, maybe there's a government program that helps you 2 months from now. And then maybe there's an individual investor that, 6 to 8 months from now is able to provide some liquidity to your business. And now you've been able to manage through this, the crisis and the recession, and come out on the other side and get more into the thrive stage. So this slide, I think, is critically important and something that you just need to look at and start executing on today.
Yeah, and that your points there reminded me of a story I heard. A good friend of mine, and actually an ambassador to Hill Capital, owns a business and has an SBA loan, and they called. He called up their bank, U.S. Bank, and got, I believe, 1, if not 2 points knocked off of his interest rate on his current SBA loan sight unseen, and that's unheard of. And so if you're take advantage of the opportunity to have the conversations with your current banking relationships and anybody that you know to see what can happen today. We get a lot of questions about the cost of capital. A lot of people think about the world in terms of interest rates, which is fine, but that can be really confusing when you try to compare it to things like fees and other things that can come with various types of loans or financing packages, or what the cost of equity is. So we broke down the cost of capital on a rough basis for every dollar. Working capital is free. It may cost you something if you have to call up any accounts receivable and negotiate a discount, but that's going to be your best source of capital, of course. A bank, depending on the timing of the loan and the interest rate, they put in $1, they're going to look for $1.15 to $1.30 back. Any existing relationships that knows you in the business already that can provide capital, this is going to be much more akin to like an angel investor. They could put in $1, and depending on the deal you strike with them, $1.15 to $3 is reasonable. If it's a friend or family that is just wants to help you out, they might be able to provide you something that would be competitive with what you could get at the bank. If it's a new relationship and somebody that's actually looking to earn a market-based rate of return, you're looking at having to pay $1.50 to $4 for every dollar you bring in. So again, they put in $1, you have to give them their dollar plus 50 cents or another $3. Compare this to alternative lenders. A lot of us as business owners are getting a ton of mail and outreach from all these alternative online lenders like OnDeck, Funding Circle, Lending Club. These are extremely expensive sources of capital. They're charging on average 45%, and that was pre-recession. We've seen deals personally where that we've looked at, and we've actually invested in a company that's had loans like this that we took them out, was they were paying anywhere from 30 to 110%. And yes, you heard that right. 110% we saw somebody paying to Cabbage. So alternative lenders are extremely expensive. They have their purpose in the world. If you truly need short-term cash and you can pay it back, it's nearly guaranteed you can pay it back 30 to 90 days, then it might be viable. But the problem is people are taking down these loans and using it to hire people or marketing programs, and that's not a good use, and that's where this money gets extremely expensive. If you're looking at relationships with private equity and venture capital, the framework to understand is that for every dollar they put in, they're looking for an opportunity to earn at least $10 back, if not dollars back. So a lot of Main Street businesses, a lot of business models don't have enough juice in them to be able to provide someone that type of upside. So selling stock to a venture capital fund may not even be a realistic opportunity for some businesses.
One thing I just emphasize on that slide, if we go back, is the fact, when you're looking at these costs, interest rates is where everybody kind of gets hung up on. And, the example that you keep seeing is the SBA disaster loan. It's 3.75% over 30 years. So you're talking banks related, that's $1.15 to $1.30. But there's the cost associated with that. But then if you start thinking, well, if I can get $300,000 right now for that cheap, that sounds like a great deal. But there's also, personal guarantees associated with those loans. And all of a sudden, if you take 300,000 and start and keep all of your expenses exactly the same for 3 months, and this thing goes 6 months, well, now you owe the government $300,000. And if you don't pay them, they use the IRS collection agents to go get that money. And what they're going to go after is your any personal assets you have, in particular, house. So you have to be very careful as you start to pull down these sources, that you sit back, look, observe, and ask, ask your community and ask for support on making these types of decisions, because the types of decisions that you make now in this emotional time could hang around much longer than this crisis is going to last. And that's the same thing with alternative lenders. You get a flyer in the mail that says you can get $100,000 in 2 days. Well, there's a catch to that. The catch is that they put 11% stated interest rate on it, but when they add fees onto that, it becomes an 80% interest rate. And so you're never going to get out of that unless you're producing a lot of cash to be able to pay it off. And that's just going to suck the lifeblood out of your business. And so you need to be able to step back, ask, and we're here to help think about those things as well, and think about what makes sense in your situation. And you don't want to compound the issue here. You want to make good decisions, try to take emotion out of it, and then use your gut to say, does this make sense or not?
Yep. Nice. Very nice. Thank you. Oh, whoops. So as you think about like sources of capital, people have asked a lot about like, how do you actually go about doing this? So we put together some insights here on how to get this executed. First is just to simply build a list in Excel, name, contact, build that out, and build that list by asking peers. Reach out to us for contacts. We're happy to help. Any membership organizations, ask your chamber, anybody that you know, and ask for connections and help them understand what you're looking for specifically, so they can help be very specific in terms of like the types of bankers, financiers, investment funds that could be helpful. If you do need to reach out to new relationships, you have to start immediately and be persistent. I see it too many times where people will just send out an email and that will be it, and they assume that that fund didn't want to talk to them. You have to be especially persistent, especially in times of chaos. So don't be afraid to call them every day or send them emails and keep trying to get through them. People have always, a lot of business owners are curious, like, well, how do I go about this? How do I sell stock? What do I do? Here's a structure that's super clean and easy to understand for not only the business owner, but for the investor. I've seen a number of business owners where they simply just put together a note. So it mimics a loan. It can be paid back over a period of time. We recommend being prepared to pay 15 to 35%. This isn't charity work, right? Those investors need a premium for illiquidity, and they need to compete where they can put those dollars, whether it's in the stock market or elsewhere. So they need to earn a market-based rate of return on that investment. If your business has upside and the equity might be worth something someday because you might sell the business, that may be compelling to an investor. So you could simply structure a warrant to give them the right to buy some of the stock, which could trigger if the business is sold. So that way you can keep it clean and easy, where you don't have to put people on your cap table and sell them stock today, but you can get them the money that you need. What's important about this is that compare and contrast this to the cost of what alternative lenders are charging. You don't have to take our word for it. OnDeck is a publicly held company, ONDK. You can look it up on Yahoo Finance. Their public statements, their presentations to Wall Street, their average interest rate is 45%. So that's, at the end of the day, kind of what you're competing with is, what might be available. And even they have limitations and personal guarantees that are kind of the hook to those capital as well. So we're going to wrap it up here and open it up to the community. We just want to really plant the seed again around execute with confidence. Lead with that data. Utilize peer insights and mental frameworks like we presented here today on Going West, to utilize that to execute with intuition, so you can get those timely decisions that have good odds of positive outcomes. And in summary, I really just want to encourage everybody, and as we open this up, share your insights and stories, help people understand where they can go. So it's the idea of pay it forward. Now's the time to share those learning moments so other business owners and entrepreneurs can see it through this challenging time as well. And we'll leave our contact information up here. Reach out to us directly. Give us a call, shoot us an email. We are going to do this again tomorrow. So if you want to jump on again, or if you know somebody that should hear this, we're going to do it one more